uncovering the truth, piece by piece, in the world of mysteries.
You're lying in bed, the world quiet around you, and yet, somewhere in the vast Australian outback, a war once broke out. Not between humans. No, this was a war between man, and emus. Yes, emus, the giant flightless birds. And surprisingly, the birds won. In 1932, Australia was struggling. Farmers were recovering from the Great Depression, and thousands of World War I veterans had been given land to farm in Western Australia. But drought, poverty, and now birds threatened everything. You see, over 20,000 emus migrated from inland to farmland during mating season. The birds trampled crops, knocked down fences, and made a mess of everything. Farmers, already desperate, demanded help. The government responded with soldiers. Yes, not wildlife officials, not biologists, but soldiers with machine guns. Major GPW Meredith and 2 soldiers were sent to Campion, armed with Lewis guns and 10,000 rounds of ammo. Their mission: defeat the emus. At first, they waited, then they opened fire, and missed. The emus scattered with military-like precision. They ran in all directions, too fast and unpredictable for the guns. And thus, the Emu War began with a loss. One observer joked, "The emus have proved they can take bullets better than any human army in the world." They ran in tight groups. When one bird fell, another would take the lead. The soldiers were outsmarted by birds. A second attempt was made near a dam. Hundreds of emus were spotted. Guns were mounted on trucks. But the terrain was too rough. The emus outran the trucks. Again, the only casualties were dignity and fuel. After several days, only a few hundred emus had been killed. But the soldiers had used thousands of bullets. Reports were embarrassing. Headlines called it the Great Emu War. The government quietly pulled the military back. But the farmers were furious. They still had emus tearing up their crops. They begged the military to return. The government reluctantly agreed. A second campaign was launched. More bullets, more chaos, and still, the emus won. By the end of both campaigns, around 1,000 emus were killed. But that's out of 20,000. That's a 5% success rate. The cost per emu, dozens of rounds each. Some say over 100 bullets were used per bird. The sun begins to dip low. Soldiers crouch, sweat dripping. Across the field, the emus pause for just a second, then vanish like shadows. The battlefield is quiet, but not still. You think the battle is over, but it's only begun. The Australian government, embarrassed but determined, launches the full offensive. This time, it's official. The Emu War has truly started. The emus were fast, agile, and oddly tactical. In open fields, they scattered into small groups. Every time soldiers aimed, the birds darted away like feathery ghosts in the wind. Major Meredith realized something absurd. His Lewis machine guns couldn't hit moving emus. Bullets flew. Emus flew faster. Attempts to mount machine guns on trucks failed. The ride was too bumpy. The gunner couldn't aim. The emus still winning. Farmers laughed nervously. Was this Australia's military? 2 soldiers, 1 machine gun, and 0 emus down. On November 8, 1932, the first campaign ended. The tally: 2,500 rounds fired. Less than 300 emus killed. The rest vanished. But just days later, politicians demanded results. The emus were still ravaging crops. Round 2 began with even more pressure. This time, Meredith tracked the birds with better planning. Ambushes, hidden routes. But again the emus outran bullets. The soldiers adapted. They aimed at clusters instead of individuals. It helped. Still, they needed luck and lots of ammo. By early December, 986 emus were confirmed dead. A better score. Yet, over 20,000 still roamed free on. Nature had clearly won this round. But the headlines were even more brutal than the birds. Military loses war to emus. Public ridicule followed. Editorials mocked the army. One paper suggested giving the emus medals for tactical brilliance. Back in Parliament, one MP sarcastically asked, "Should we train emus as shock troops for the next war?" Eventually, the operation was shut down. Meredith withdrew his men. The Great Emu War, unofficially, had ended in defeat. But the story didn't end there. Farmers still begged for help, yet the government refused to deploy soldiers again. Instead, they offered bounties. For every emu shot, a reward. Suddenly, local hunters became the new front line. Ironically, the bounty system was far more effective. Over the years, thousands of emus were eliminated. Yet the war left scars, not on the emus, but on Australia's pride. A mighty military, outwitted by birds. Major Meredith, despite the fiasco, received no punishment. Some say he did what he could with a hopeless mission. The emus, meanwhile, became legends, jokes, memes, national icons of accidental resistance. In modern times, the Emu War has inspired documentaries, cartoons, and even indie video games. Historians still debate, was it foolishness or desperation? Did Australia learn from Aitor, simply laugh? One fact remains. No birds have ever received more media coverage in a war they didn't know they were in. The Emu War, in all its absurdity, remains a reminder of nature's stubborn will and human hubris. And somewhere in the outback, emus still roam, victorious, untouched, watching. The Great Emu War isn't just history, it's comedy, tragedy, and unintended poetry. Every nation has its myths. Australia's, that they once lost a war. To birds. In textbooks, it's a footnote. In storytelling, it's unforgettable. Perhaps history's most peaceful war. Not a war of men but of feathers, dust, and embarrassment. And so ends the tale of emus versus empire. A reminder, nature doesn't play by our rules. Next time you see an emu, salute it. Somewhere in its blood flows the spirit of unexpected. And so, the Great Emu War ended not with a treaty, not with a surrender, but with a quiet shrug. The military withdrew, the emus marched on, and the farmers were left with their broken fences and bruised pride. In the end, only around 1,000 emus had been killed out of an estimated 20,000. The rest, they just kept running. Australia didn't lose a war to birds. It simply couldn't win against nature's chaos in feathery form. Decades later, this strange little chapter still flutters in the margins of history books. No medals were awarded. No monuments were built. But those who know, smile. Because in a world filled with bloody battles and senseless wars, this one reminds us, sometimes the enemy has wings, and sometimes the only way to win is to laugh.